Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's really been taking the internet by storm. Dave Chappelle, who, if you're on the younger end of our audience, you might not know he's originally a legendary sketch show creator and host, Chappelle Show from Comedy Central back in the early to mid 2000s. That's where most people got to know him. That's kind of what gave him such high status in the world of comedy. And then in recent years, his sporadic stand-up specials would give him a degree of prominence as well as controversy often. Recently, his Netflix special called The Closer got him in heavy circulation in the Twitter sphere and in the cancel capital that is, well, I guess Twitter and TikTok and the internet. And rather than just standing here defending him, let's actually explore some of the cases being made against him. Here with me today is the highly educated and prepared Greek myth himself. It's Nikos Sotirakopoulos. Wow, that was a relapse. That was a relapse to like our first shows together, calling you Sotirakopoulos rather than Sotirakopoulos. Okay, now I forgot how to say it. Anyway, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I watched the Chappelle special yesterday. So we thought, yes, instead of just doing a boring episode, they tried to cancel Dave Chappelle, let's try to see what are the main arguments. But before that, I want to ask a question to you because obviously you know comedy way more. So the first thing that I found very interesting is that the part I laughed the most was the part that pissed me off the most, which was the joke about the Jews and the space Jews. So the question is, I'm thinking out loud, is it, quote, okay to laugh at something that you know it's not a, quote, correct view, and it's something that you know perpetuates something that you are not intellectually comfortable with? So I found it hilarious, but then I thought, yeah, well, he should know better. So everyone has this thought in their mind. So it's not only the transgender movement who think, okay, that guy's funny, we get it, but we don't like what he's saying. So what's your take as someone who has done comedy on that thing, that you laugh with something that, but at the same time, I don't really like this?
I mean, so the joke, I guess, was, and it's not an obvious point, like you kind of have to think about it a little bit to get if this is the joke he's making, that like in this scenario, like the Jews were oppressed in ancient times, ended up leaving, like building a spaceship, leaving, and then returning to take over the world. And, you know, the punchline is, and I'll call it Space Jews. But because of the way he speaks, it's unclear if he was saying juice or Jews. But I think most people heard Jews. He can always.
There was also another time with the slave who becomes then an oppressive master when he gains his freedom. So
okay, yeah, now that you mention it, that is kind of, well, okay, first of all, he's not a lot of like Jewish comedians and just like Jewish jokers in general, which is, you know, humor is a big part of like a lot of Jewish people's presentation and kind of dialect. This kind of stereotype that like Jews are powerful and in high positions of power is largely perpetuated by Jewish people. And it's because most people, especially educated people, are kind of leftist in their premises. They're like, they hold altruism. So capitalism, even as much as people participate in it, they kind of resent it and are afraid of it. So you see like a lot of Jewish comedians who are kind of like embarrassed by their own success and sort of the success of their community. So you see these kind of stereotypes in general made by Jewish comedians as well. So I guess I just made that connection now when you mentioned that I guess the story is of like that a slave who is freed and then becomes like an oppressor himself is like Chappelle was like saying that's what a lot of Jewish people have become.
Or now more specifically, that's Israel. I thought he was talking specifically about, because he said he got a piece of land, so that's why I thought he was. But anyway, the question remains: is it, quote, okay to laugh at something where you know that, okay, I don't agree with it. Like, I think it's simplifying something. And yet, while you're at it, I mean, the guy is funny, even if he basically does nothing, to laugh your heart out.
I mean, I don't look. I mean, we don't see any kind of. We don't recognize an intrinsic authority of like what's okay to laugh at. If something's funny, enjoy it, and then maybe think about it. Ask like, is this? And I imagine as time passes, you maybe won't find something funny that you previously did, or vice versa. Like I find things funny that might have shocked me when I was growing up. Like, how could anyone joke about that? But kind of from hanging around people who kind of joke about very abrasive things and kind of getting used to it and kind of like finding my own take on it, I came to enjoy, I guess, inappropriate jokes. Now, in this case, Chappelle, it's not just that his joke was shocking. It's that he was making a point, I think, about Israel or about the Jews. But this is something that's not uncommon among blacks, especially blacks who find Islam to be their religion of choice. Dave Chappelle, he did convert to Islam. And, it's kind of like an unspoken reality in America, as much as like the Jews are these like bleeding heart liberals and they don't ever want to criticize, the so-called black community. They do know that, a lot of black people are into Louis Farrakhan, especially black Muslims are they hold very anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiments. And I mean, that's just a fact. So I'm surprised it took Dave Chappelle this long. He's been in the public eye for almost 20 years. I'm surprised it took him this long to finally start picking on the Jews this way. But I mean, it's a topic that should be discussed. It's sad that the culture doesn't have much of an answer to Chappelle, other than this channel and a few others like it. There's very few people that have a satisfactory answer to Dave Chappelle's insinuations.
But people who joined us today, they want to hear about something else. So we're going to get to the trans issue. But what I found very interesting is that, so he offended, and I have a list here, the Jews, the veterans, Mike Pence, the Q movement, Trump, blacks, whites, gays, lesbians. And yet what really stuck was the issue of his take on the trans movement. Now, he said that he's an ally in terms of he recognizes that many people struggle with discrimination, that it's a difficult situation to navigate. He mentioned that he believes that trans women are women, but his comments created this big backlash. So yesterday, there were protests outside Netflix. There were people who resigned. So what we did is let's try to find what really hurts the trans community. And I have to say, doing the research, I found some trans activists who were very, very helpful to read or to watch their videos. So they tried genuinely to navigate the situation. And I really appreciate it. And shout out to a YouTuber, a trans woman named Jessie Gender. She had like a 1-hour video, which I probably disagree with most of the things, but I found it very, very useful how she explained what is the problem of the trans community. So they start by saying, look, the main thing here is that Chappelle gave an uncritical support to J.K. Rowling. And then he said, I'm Team TERF. So we would say, well, okay, but J.K. Rowling basically said that gender is a thing. Well, their claim is that no, J.K. Rowling did more than that. That J.K. Rowling actually, when she elaborated on her views, based her take on points on statistics or on numbers or on facts or on data that are not actually factual data in terms of how many people want to detransition and how many people how many people are harmed by the process of transitioning. So the main argument is that J.K. Rowling made a very simplistic case. This simplistic case fueled existing hate against the trans community. And Dave Chappelle had a very simplistic take on J.K. Rowling's simplistic take. So that was an argument which I thought, okay, there's definitely something there. What I didn't like, though, on the criticism is that they say that Chappelle and J.K. Rowling give fertile ground to the so-called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. So people who have been characterized as TERFs say that this term is actually a slur. They say that this term is actually demeaning, and they don't recognize themselves as, quote, TERFs. So it's very interesting that in a campaign and in a movement that points the attention that, look, there has been some othering of the trans community, there is also some othering towards TERFs. And in that video, for example, and that was my main disagreement, they mentioned that TERF is a hate group. And they said that conservatives such as the Heritage Foundation, which this transgender YouTuber also characterized as a hate group, make use of this cheap propaganda. So there's something good there, I think, which is, yeah, maybe don't take simplistic slogans out. So just J.K. Rowling said gender is a thing, whereas no one disagrees that gender is a thing. And that the arguments behind J.K. Rowling are actually cheap arguments, and they don't really add much to the dialogue. So that was their biggest, let's say, their biggest grievance from Chappelle's. So, and actually I was very surprised to hear that. I never realized that the J.K. Rowling thing is so central in the narrative of the trans community. So have we got anything on that?
I mean, so this is over J.K. Rowling saying like women, like people with a cervix are women, and there's a word for them. It's not, you know, because an article headline was mentioned people with a cervix or people with a uterus.
And not only that, but then she elaborated by writing an article. So her point mainly was, if I understood it well, that a trans woman cannot have the experience of a woman. So basically the quote TERF say, look, transgender women cannot be parts or cannot be a full part, let's say, of women's movement because there are struggles that women get that they don't get. So again, I don't understand why this should be such a big issue, but turns out it is. So I'm just presenting you the narrative, and we can maybe try to see if there's something to it.
So first of all, after I watched the full Netflix special as well, and it's like if you watch the full thing, then the clipped out parts circulating Twitter, they come off completely different. Like, yes, he's still kind of making a point that he probably sort of believes, but he also says a lot of tongue-in-cheek things throughout the special, and it all kind of leads up to a very kind of heartfelt, personal kind of memoriam for his fallen friend.
The Daphne story. We have a whole,
I know we'll get to that
section on that. We're gonna get to that.
Yeah, but his point that he kind of makes about like white people have kind of found a way to like flip it on black people. I mean, I've said things like that here on the show, just that like I've said about blacks and gays. I mean, and I liked my favorite moment of the special was when Chappelle said like something like if a trans person says we've been fighting for decades for equality, and Chappelle says like, oh yeah, blacks and gays, you got anything to match that, something like that? Do you know what it's like? Decades, like more like, you know, millennia, right? I mean, it's only a very modern phenomenon that like a gay person could even you know, identify and live that lifestyle. And you know, blacks of course have also been oppressed and enslaved for a very, very long time, generation after generation. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious here, but the part that I liked was when Chappelle kind of dramatizes this by saying that, like, after the blacks earn their freedom and they want equal rights, then a white person could just say, "Oh yeah, N-word," and he says the word N-word. I identify as a woman. Like, kind of like, now you're oppressing me. Like, you need to use this word when addressing me or this pronoun. And Chappelle is like, huh? He's dramatizing something. I mean, I find these dramatizations fun. Of course, they're simplifying something that's very complex. Of course, he's kind of collectivizing people when in reality, everybody's a person. Everyone's an individual that has a number of select values and interacts with other individuals in a very personalized way. It's just, he's dramatizing something. This is one of the things that a comedian does. So I think to the degree we engage with people that are criticizing Chappelle, we're kind of giving their criticism the high ground. I wouldn't respond to these criticisms. And some of the better comedic forces in society, they've done a good job at not engaging with criticism, like the South Park guys. They occasionally have responded to criticism through the mouths of their characters. But for the vast majority of the last 25 years, even when they were put on the cover of Newsweek, even when they've been accused of being racist, anti-Semites, and all of that, they completely just stay in their lane and wait for the storm to pass. And that's really the only way. You can't convince somebody to appreciate your jokes. You can't convince somebody to find something funny or worse yet, to prove there's a social value to what you're doing. You can't convince someone of that.
Yeah. And so my overall take on this issue is that, yeah, I think maybe Chappelle saying I'm Team Turf, yeah, Chappelle doesn't really know much about it and he admits it. But at the same time, this is not a philosophy lecture. So you go there to have a good time. You know, you laugh with the joke. Then you think, well, but anyway, but as we said, we want to see if he did something, you know, very, very bad, in which case we'd say there's something particularly morally reprehensible here. So he also simplistically said that the issue with the trans movement is that he gave the blackface parallel. So in the same way as some people would put a blackface to mock black people, trans women, for example, would, quote, act as women to mock women. And again, that was a joke that didn't particularly land with me. I get why people would find it very, again, not only simplistic, but wrong. But I don't think there was any malice or there was anything very, very particular there.
I thought it was a good joke. I thought it was a good joke. And of course, you know, one of the things you can do as a comedian is you can say something that's, let's say, you know, 65% true, but contains 35% that it's completely off. And you get to say it, and you get to enjoy yourself and perform your art, do your job, do your craft. It's a type of art. And I know it can be triggering and upsetting, just like with the space Jews stuff. It's like, oh, so does he actually believe that? And the answer is yes, he might. But I mean, look, this is part of like living amongst one another and letting artists be artists, letting comedians be comedians. You're going to get unfiltered thought, whether it's through poetry or through comedy or a combination of the two. And it's the job of academics, you know, it's the job of intellectuals, even it's the job maybe of you and me on this show to actually look at, you know, are trans people equivalent to people wearing blackface? No, because blackface is clearly meant to mock, whereas people who are trans seem to have a particular psychological inclination to dress and present themselves that way. So the two are not perfectly equivalent. But again, I mean, I see no problem.
They're not equivalent at all. But again,
okay.
Another issue that came up was the dead naming, and we had the discussion, I think, in the Daily Objective with a trans person, and so this issue was discussed. For some people, it's very important. For other people, it's not very important. So the quote dead naming happened for Caitlyn Jenner. So this means that Chappelle referred to her with her pre-transition name. I don't even know if Caitlyn Jenner is offended by this, so I don't think this was something very important, because again, it varies from person to person. Do you know if Caitlyn Jenner does, let's say, objects to being a dead name?
I mean, in some contexts it would be rude. In other contexts, it's perfectly appropriate. So I thought everything Chappelle did in this special, was within a certain context. So I didn't. So yeah, that particular mentioning Bruce Jenner. I mean, I think, look, we're all adults. Can we remember this as well? I know maybe that should be my final statement of the episode. We're all adults. Like, we can handle words, or we can handle offensive ideas, even if Chappelle does believe it. By the way, most people, maybe all people, but at least most people have certain beliefs and premises that are wrong, that are irrational, and therefore will end up sending them to all types of very irrational and potentially dangerous conclusions. This is the world we live in. Go ahead. Back to you.
Here's, though, the biggest objection that someone would say. So this is the objection that comes up in all the challenges to Chappelle. They said, look, it's not just a disagreement because with us trans people, it's different. Why it's different? So because they will claim 2021 has been the deadliest year for trans people. And they say that trans people are in danger from two different sides, let's say. The one is your own self in terms of dealing with the pressure that you get from outside. So they will cite the high suicide rates. And the second is the overt, let's say, attacks or discrimination or mocking or not acceptance that you get from the outside. So they say that this creates a mix which makes this group very, very vulnerable and very, very, how to put it, at risk of being victimized. And again, either by crime from the outside or via suicide, which is though the result of mistreatment and of not acceptance, among other things. So their argument is that's why this is not the same as the Jews. This is not the same as joking even with lesbians or whatever. This time, for this group, it's different. So,
I mean, this is an ongoing argument that's been made against comedians. You know, if you joke, let's say, about black stereotypes, saying like black people are violent, and that's like kind of the punchline of the joke that presents them that way, then the argument goes, then the next time a police officer pulls over a black guy, he'll be more trigger happy and ready to pull his gun and pull the trigger because he's apprehensive that, or he's expecting the black guy to pull his own gun out. So therefore, don't joke about black stereotypes vis-a-vis violence. And in this case, yeah, I think they're saying if you make fun of trans people or in any way suggest that their identity is invalid, they're more likely to commit suicide. Is there a truth to this cause and effect? I mean, dropping all other context, like all other influences that go into these various problems in the world, I don't know. I truly don't know. What I do know is that comedy is good. I know today, certainly in Dave Chappelle's value system, comedy is good. It's his chosen vocation. Part of, telling him to not tell a joke that he wrote, that he feels that he believes to be an important part of his overall routine or his overall show, telling him not to do that, to me, is like telling an architect, your building shouldn't include that detail, or telling a doctor you shouldn't perform surgery as you believe. So if the world needs to end in order for Dave Chappelle to do comedy his way, then I say the world had a good run, and I'm sorry it had to end.
Okay, that's very interesting, but it has two readings. The one is whether he should have the right to do so, in which case we go to the barricades and we say yes. The other issue is it right to do so? So it's the same discussion we have with quote media, social media censorship. Of course, they should have the right to deplatform anyone they want, but is this the right thing? Or someone who has a shop and says no Greeks inside, of course he should have the right, but is this the moral thing to do?
I mean, the job of a comedian or a writer is in some ways similar to owning a store and deciding who gets to enter it. But in other ways, it's kind of different. You let your stream of consciousness flow more freely, and you sort of create these word compositions in a way that is kind of very personal to you. So just blatantly putting up a sign in front of your store that says, no people of this skin color allowed, it doesn't strike me as artistically motivated. It doesn't strike me as noble or honest or in any way admirable. So in that case, we would probably easily say that is morally contemptible and should be legally permissible. When it comes to Dave Chappelle telling a joke or sort of crafting this mini universe in the form of his words, I see it as there's much more leniency to say this is, in his context, this is morally agreeable, and I really struggle to criticize him, let alone condemn him for it.
Understood. Okay, to be honest, there's no shame in saying sometimes I haven't formed yet an opinion, and my case here is I'm not avoiding the difficult discussion. I'm just struggling still with these things. Okay, Three more things that I found very important in the discussion around this. The first is that Chappelle is completely immersed in the identity politics he tries to mock. And I don't know if this is conscious or unconscious, but in a way, he is part of this world. So remember when he says, well, actually, at the very end of the day, I haven't got a problem with this group or this group. It's basically with whites at the very end of the day. Or, you know, your tribe, or he used the term tribe, which I found interesting. So in a way, by mocking this tribal identity focused, he's doing this from within, let's say, the castle of identity. Do you also get this?
Yeah,
idea?
but you get this. I mean, you get this from virtually everyone. I say virtually. I mean, really, other than objectivists, you don't really see individualists in the culture. So at the end of the day, most people are living with this contradiction. There's no perfect collectivist out there, right? Because or else they would just literally just give their body parts and organs away to the community. And then, of course, sans a good philosophy, there's no good individualist to be found. So Dave Chappelle, in one respect, he wants to be seen as an individual, and he says, you know, don't judge me for my skin color, and don't tell me who I'm supposed to be. But at the same time, he's identifying as Black and saying our community are dealing with this, and now here comes that community, the white community or whatever, white people treating us such and such way. I mean, these are the contradictions he lived with. He famously, in my estimation of things, lost his mind or acted very erratically. When season 3 of Chappelle's Show was set to air, he famously kind of didn't show up or canceled at the very last minute, disappeared for years. So maybe it's wrong to say he lost his mind, because he sort of takes exception to that. But definitely acted, I think, erratically. And I think he was, conflicted. On one hand, he found success. On the other hand, he feels kind of guilty about it. Like on one hand, he's a great success story and he's getting people to speak about important issues maybe as well. But also he sees, 300 million Americans, maybe that's the wrong number, but he sees a lot of Americans joking about race in a way that like Chappelle feels, oh, no, I didn't mean you all can do this. I didn't mean every white guy now could joke about Black people. So I think he was kind of conflicted by his own success. In this special that we're discussing here today, he says with pride, when they ask him, like, who are you supposed to be? And his answer is, I'm the guy that got off the bus. And walked away from $50 million. Okay, you walked away from $50 million for no reason that I can understand. And then you're going around complaining that Comedy Central ripped you off, that they're not paying you royalties for Chappelle's Show. You walked away from the lucrative part of that deal. Getting your foot through the door was the part where you basically hand it all over to them. Then season 3 was supposed to be when you cashed in and became a billionaire, but you walked away from that because you're emotionally unstable. So excuse me if I'm not losing any sleep over that. Sorry, I know that's a bit of a tangent.
No, I have no idea about the
TLDR. Too long didn't read is, yeah, he's living with contradictions. On one hand, he wants to be seen as an individual and he wants to remember his trans friend as an individual. On the other hand, he does see people as collectives. So the only people that really understand individualism are people who take Ayn Rand's philosophy seriously. And yes, there may be a time to galvanize with people of your group. Let's say you're Blacks fighting for freedom from slavery, maybe Jews trying to escape anti-Semitism in the 19th century. But the end goal ought to be individualism. So the purpose should be, yes, we're going to galvanize now, but it's to an end that is, we're all going to be individuals with no collective identity at all, ideally in the future.
So I made a shout out to some people and some voices in the transgender community that, again, I probably disagree, but I really appreciate that they came to this with the idea, look, we don't want to cancel Chappelle. We just want to have a discussion, a nuanced discussion. These are difficult topics. Unfortunately, there's the opposite side. So there was an article in Vox, and again, I wrote a tweet about this, what I found very interesting doing research on this is, at the end of the day, it's not a culture war with two sides. The two sides for me, the distinctive line is people who try to navigate the world and try to figure out what's happening. I mean, they have their ideas, but they try to figure out, okay, what's the truth out there? What is happening? And of course, they are right on some things, wrong on other things, but they're in a process. And the other people is, oh yeah, culture wars. Let's throw more gas to this fire and let's see it burn everything. So Chappelle ended his show with a very emotional tribute to Daphne Dorman, who was a transgender woman who committed suicide. Now, Chappelle very rightly said, I don't know why she committed suicide. What I do know is that because she supported me in a previous cycle of attacks on him, she got a lot of attack from social media. So here's how Vox is presenting this story. And again, I don't want to give publicity to this, but I want to see, to point attention to what is the way not to view these issues. So, quote, to attribute Dorman's death to bullying from, quote, woke scolds erases the reality that as a trans woman, Dorman was extremely vulnerable to bullying and harassment because of her gender identity, as well as mental health struggles and becoming a victim of hate crimes or other acts of violence. End of quote. Notice the collectivism here. This woman, we know that she got harassed and, quote, bullied by that particular community. And what is Vox take out of this? Yeah, but forget this for a moment. She was also a trans woman, and trans women get bullied. So it's literally telling you, erase reality, erase what you see in front of you for that particular individual, and think only in terms of the groups. She was part of that group. That group is bullied. Yeah, the fact that she got bullied by people in the group, forget about it. So I found this very, very interesting. This is a struggle we have to impose our narrative over reality. So these are people, and I don't want to psychologize from thousands of miles ago, but I see people who are not interested in finding the truth. I see people who say, look, we're going to pass the party line no matter what. We're going to attack the other side no matter what. We're going to throw more gasoline to the fire no matter what. And I found it very, very, it offers nothing. It doesn't offer you any better understanding. It just says, to use Rucka's famous phrase, you throw red meat to your group, and that's, doesn't offer anything.
Yeah.
Good.
Doesn't offer anything. Should we, do you have more, or should we jump over to super chats?
Actually, that was all. Yeah. Just one last point, that
okay,
in the same way as we try to give the merit to voices in the trans movement in terms of saying there's some merit here, in the same way that they say, look, be careful and notice how you criticize or attack us because these things have actual effects in our lives, I would say the same to trans activists. Because, for example, in the UK, we saw some weeks ago that a woman could not go to the Labour Party conference because of all the death threats and threats about her physical integrity of being attacked, because she was on the wrong side of the argument on trans issues, apparently. We've seen many people being, quote, cancelled. We've seen people losing their jobs. We've seen people being attacked. And again, this is not the way to go through life. So in the same way that someone asks, look, think a bit twice before you say something, because A, it might not be accurate and you might be othering some people, and B, be a bit considerate. I would say the same thing. That's a discussion that should happen also within the trans movement, because, for example, saying that TERFs are indiscriminately a hate group, I think there's a bit of othering there.
Yeah, look, when we talked about Stossel's lawsuit against Facebook, I said, I think the internet was always too good to be true. Eventually legal concerns and corporate interests, putting aside the Republican attempt to regulate and break up big tech, but putting that aside, just corporate interests and legal concerns eventually will just make the internet like another form of television. It's going to be a few small company, a few big companies. And that was my kind of takeaway from that story. And here I'm saying comedy really was always too good to be true. In a society where we take things so literally, we're increasingly scrutinizing, where we can't just let a comedian do comedy. We have to have a discussion of, is there social value to this? And how is this affecting society? If that's what we're doing, then every comedian is canceled sooner or later. There's no such thing as a comedian feeling free to express himself, if that's the world we're living in. Shall I read some super chats? All right. CJ says, on my chair, I sip my drink on YouTube, where I share the link to my favorite stream where I can think. Wow, this guy's got talent. Rat Lover with 10 pounds says, I think it's cool, or at least potentially cool, even if it is controversial. Marilyn with 149. Thank you. Kindred Amy with $5 says the closer, that's the name of the Chappelle special, had more pro-individualism elements than collectivist elements in it. This shows in his friendship with trans and white Daphne Dorman. Then Robert.
And again, that was the most moving part. Obviously not, but there were also many funny parts. So I would say if you watch it and you want to have a good time, you probably will.
Robert with $10 says there was a comedian from Nantucket who observed the woke trend and bucked it. He made his jokes crude and culturally rude, got canceled, and told the industry to blank.
Is this a poem?
I think it is. I think
sounds like it rhymed.
It did. Phil with 50 pounds says, hey guys, Rucka, I liked your episode on don't talk about philosophy. Don't mention philosophy. Now please correct that and send 50 pounds. I'm just kidding. Excellent, he goes on, especially with sometimes questions about relationships just being common sense. Yeah, and I'll chime in here. Common sense derived from experience and speaking to people with experience. He goes on, Nikos, great show with Jonathan on Insulate Britain Morons. Thanks, guys, and well said. Nikos, I know we shouldn't be going on a tangent now. What if someone asked you the question that Don asked Peikoff? Someone said, I'm friends with the girl. I want to be romantically engaged, and she just wants to be friends. What advice would you give if this was a friend or your son or someone?
Okay. Peikoff said, is there any version of you or any aspect of you that he doesn't know? If yes, there's a chance. Otherwise, there is no chance. Unfortunately, I would say the only thing that you can do is reinvent yourself if you think it's worth it. So the question is, what
are you talking about? Reinvent yourself?
Wait, let me finish. Finish.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been friend zoned for very proper reasons, right? So for example, you are not self-confident. So if the friend zone, what does Jordan Peterson say? There's one thing he says, which is very nice. Often the rejection you get from women, it's like a mirror. It's telling you the things that you're not good at. Now, you could be friend zoned because someone does not see who you really are, in which case you say, okay, I might try somewhere else. But if you are friend zoned because of things that you in yourself think, well, I could do better here, then you have to work on these things. That would be my take. Do you disagree with that?
Yes, because when you're rejected by somebody, there is nothing you can do to change that. Not reinventing yourself, whatever that means. They've rejected you. Their subconscious rejected you before they could come up with all these reasons. So this is.
Oh wait, you want to tell me you've never been friend-zoned by a girl who then later changed her mind?
I mean, attraction works in mysterious ways, but the only way to hope it'll ever change is to completely accept this person's decision and ideally kind of give them some space and probably focus your attention to other places. So I don't tell someone who's been rejected like, oh yeah, well, you have two choices: reinvent yourself or accept it. No, all you can do is accept this person's rejection.
Yes, but
and why would I ever be friends? Why would I ever be friend zoned by anybody? By the way, so I don't even accept the premise of your question. But go on.
Okay, but don't you agree that you could be friend zoned by someone, and then after 3 years, because you're a different person, you didn't do it to win back that person who friend zoned you, but you develop in life, and then in 3 years, they see you under a different prism because you're a different person.
Yes. So keyword being you left them the hell alone and went on living with your life. You used this rejection as a launch pad. So yeah. So now you agree with me, but that's what I was looking for in the first place. Someone rejects you.
You agree with me, but anyway.
No, well, it happened organically. That you can't plan these things out. You can't say I'm going to reinvent myself and then they're going to find me attractive. That's just not how life goes. So anyway.
I think we're saying the same thing, by the way.
Yes, but I'm saying it correctly, and you're saying it. I think some things got lost in Greek translation.
Maybe.
Jonathan Honig with 199. Thank you. Rat Lover with 10 pounds says it's so true. Like with racism and what happened to Denzel Washington and being gay and what happened to the people who were gay in the 1950s went through if they came out. Marilyn with 199. Thank you for that. Rat Lover again with 10 pounds. Rat Lover must have quite a lucrative career. Thank you. I think that sometimes there is truth in parodies and various forms of comedy and truth in various art. Then Rat Lover with 10 more pounds says, and personally, I think some controversial things are wonderful.
On the issue of humor, by the way, let me pitch an essay in the Fountainhead essay series, which is actually read one more super chat. I literally have it 2 meters from here. I don't remember who wrote it. I'm back in 20 seconds.
All right, Marilyn with $2, and then Emilio with $9.99. Thank you for that. All right, those are all the super chats. Go ahead.
Okay, so the essay is called Humor in the Fountainhead. It's by Robert Mayhew. Why did I thought it was Killed by Laughter? Anyway.
That was a lecture I think he gave.
Sorry?
I think his lecture might have been called that, Killed by Laughter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe it's a yeah, you're right. But it talks about that you can make humor in terms of destroying something, and you can make humor in terms of elevating something or showing the insignificance of something. And again, not every humor is the same, and there are some attempts at humor where you should say, okay, this is not cool, and there are others you could say, okay, I might like it, I might not like it. But anyway, again, it's an issue that I haven't got. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, and I never got the impression that Ayn Rand put much thought into humor. So when she was asked about it, she seemed like taken aback by the question. Even she got angry at a questioner, which was not entirely uncommon for her to do. And she came up on the spot with this, I think, this example of what we find funny. A woman slipping on a banana peel, like a well-dressed woman slipping on a banana peel was her example of something funny, which I don't find funny. And I don't think Rand would find funny either. So of all the things that Ayn Rand has spoken about, this is one example of something where I don't think she's put that much, like, I don't really, maybe she's making a good point, but I think there's a lot more. Like you said, there's other types of humor as well, which are not covered by the observations she made on the fly in those Q&As.
Can I make one last point?
Yes.
In retrospect, I don't like the formulation reinvent yourself. You're right. I would say it's better to say, go away, go on with your life. And if go on with your life means, you pursue values, you have goals, which means by doing these things, you become slightly different person, then it might work. But reinvent yourself as an end in itself, I agree with you. I'll have to say this. Yeah. In this one.
Yeah. You dodged a bullet. Honestly, you dodged a bullet. Somebody is not into you. Thank your lucky stars. Grieve if you must, and then use that energy to better on things that you can control. Practice serenity. All right. Coming up, Jesus Christ, we're almost stepping on this next show with how long we're going. At 7 p.m. UK time, it's Enjoy Parenting with Lisa Van Dam. Then at 8 p.m. UK time, it's the Communication Boot Camp for members only. So if you're not a member, you're probably kind of stepping back, looking at your life right now, kind of wondering what went wrong, because you're not going to be able to attend Communication Boot Camp unless you become a member. So check that out. That's with Don Watkins. That's the real deal, folks. Then at 10 p.m. UK time, it's Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasser. And the episode today is Hope. Hope is a dangerous thing. It can make a man go mad. You know what movie that's from?
Help me.
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, that's a movie that's worth of an episode at some point. But anyway, okay. Do we have time, you think, for Clubhouse? I'm very curious what the people think.
Yeah, might as well. I've got a few minutes.
Okay, let's go there for like 10 minutes, and then we break it for Lisa show. Okay. Thanks, Rucka, and thanks, everyone.
And goodbye.